1?
Yeah, because see, this verse in particular, Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1, this verse is quoted to support a lot of different things, right? Um, and even when I quote this verse, I may have it support 3 or 4 different things, depending on what day of the week and what point I'm trying to get across. So let me start there, right? Isaiah 4, chapter 4, verse 1 reads, "And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, We shall eat our own food and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name to take away our reproach." Okay, cool. Um, Now you may hear that verse quoted in the obvious is to see in support of what we would know as polygyny or even polygamy. And real quick, there's a difference. Polygamy is the practice of simply dabbling with more than one woman simultaneously. Polygyny is the art of marrying the women simultaneously. So, for the men who say that they're for the lifestyle, I think it's important to know the difference, even as the women, because maybe you want a polygynous man, maybe you want a polygamous man. I've met a lot of women who have come with the acceptance that their man may not be monogamous, but they would rather have a polygamous man than a polygynous man, meaning you could have, like, keep your wives over there and I'll be over here, and then, and I'll come through my thug this, or you come over here when it's convenient, and that's just that. And I'm okay with that. And if that's what floats your boat, then so be it. Me myself, I love the art of polygyny. I love the unity of it, the structure, and just the camaraderie and the communal living that comes with it. But either way, don't quote this verse, men and women, in support of that, because you have 7 women clinging on to him in one man's garment, right? Some of the other interpretations or things that would be supported is that of, women being so bad off in these last days that they don't even want, they be like, we have our own food. We don't even need your food. If we got our own clothes, you ain't even got to spend no money on that. Just let us come here, right? Well, that's only going to happen in the time of calamity. And even back to the first one, for the men who also using this verse to support, taking on more than one wife, quite honestly, when you read this, these women who are coming to this one man, well, they didn't really come on their own accord. They didn't come in the time of peace. They came when shit got bad. So I don't know if you really would want those as a wife, because they didn't get it the first time. And it's almost with anybody, as if now it's bad, so you're going to come in, you're going to circle back around. Men and women do this. It's not just the women. You passed up on me beforehand, but now you're being kicked out your place. Car notes due. It's cold outside. Hey, look, you ain't even got to give me the room. I just sleep on the couch. And I'm not saying you shouldn't let him sleep on the couch. I'm just telling you, like, that may not be the woman or the man for you. Because the woman or the man for you would have seen it the first time. They don't like to see it one time. You know what I'm saying? So this is this verse. But in all honesty, to get what this verse means, I want to start us in chapter 2. Right? So it says that the word that Yeshayahu, or Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, and it shall be in the latter days. Indication number 1, that the mountain of the house of Yahuwah is established on the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. And many people shall come and say, Come, let us go to the mountain of Yahuwah. And sometimes I'll say Yahuwah, sometimes I'll say Yahweh. They're interchangeable. So don't let it confuse you. It says, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, and let him teach us his ways, and let us walk in his paths. For out of Zion comes forth the Torah, or the law, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. Clue number 2. Because I've talked about, when reading these prophets, when they speak of the word of Yah.
Wow.
Plain Just gave you a gem.
Yep.
Just gave you a gem.
Yep.
Okay. It says 4, and he shall judge between the nations and shall reprove many people. Who's going to be doing the judging in the end times, or in this times of reservation, rather?
Yeah.
Who? Y'all what?
You said who's going to be judging?
Yahshua is. Because they just told you without telling you. It says back in verse 3, it says, and many people shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob. Stop. Why didn't they just say that? Why they said Elohim? Elohim means what?
God.
Mighty ones, plural. It says, because before it says, let us come to the mountain of Yahweh, or Yahuwah. Then immediately it says, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob. It didn't say the El of Jacob, but the mighty ones of Jacob. And let him teach us his ways, and let us walk in his paths. For out of Zion comes the Torah and the word of Yahuwah from Jerusalem. This is now Mashiach that we're talking about, because Mashiach is going to judge. And when you read in Acts chapter 17, and it talks about for Yah has overlooked the times of ignorance, but requires all men to repent, because there comes a day that he has appointed a man to judge the entire earth. Who is that man? Yahshua. So Yahshua here, now when you start talking about judgment, this is what I'm telling you, he's all through scripture. It says, and he shall judge between the nations and shall reprove many people. Stop. He said in Matthew chapter 24, not many in that day shall come to me. He said, many shall come to me in that day, saying, Master, Master, have we not done X, Y, and Z in your name? And Mashiach says what? Depart from me, you workers of law, I never knew you. He said many shall come. So here we're being told he shall judge between the nations, and he shall reprove many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up the sword against nation, neither teach battle anymore. In time. The system that we live in right now is indicative of the tree that we eat from. Good and evil. So we could take something like a sickle and prune wheat with it and weeds and everything, or we can go to war with it. We can take something like fire. We can purify water, make food, heat it up, or we can go to war with it. Torture, rocks even. That's our nature. We are dualists by nature. The whole object is to become like supernatural or supernatural, to rise above our natural nature, which is good and evil. We need to just get to where we can be like our creator, because he's just good. That's what he knows. The same thing I told Jojo today. I said, well, Jojo, you know, if you were to go commit a crime right now, according to the laws of the land, your mom would be held responsible. But because you now know and comprehend right from wrong, there are things from this point on out that you alone are going to be judged for. No one can intervene outside of Mashiach for you at that point. Welcome to the game. You're not part of it. From this point on out, everything that you do counts. And everything that you learn, you're now responsible for. Solomon says the more you know, the more you heard. And the reason being is because now you got to do something with it. They say when you know better, you do better. You can't use ignorance as an excuse anymore. Again, in the book of Acts, it says that Yah has forgiven the times of ignorance, simply meaning lack of knowledge. But now it requires all men to repent. Therefore, at some point in time, someone brought you up to speed on what it is and what it ain't. So now you'll be able to accountable, because now you know. Again, Solomon says the more you know, the more you heard. So that phrase, ignorance is bliss, may have some truth to it. Either way, down in verse 5, it says, O y'all house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of Yahweh, for you have forsaken your people, the house of Jacob, because they have been filled from the east. Why is that important? Them being filled from the east. What does that mean? From Jerusalem, where's Babylon?
Is that east of Jerusalem?
It's east of everything.
Oh, okay.
From Zion, from Israel, Babylon is east of us. And so is India, and the Punjab, and these places where they got several deities. So you being filled from the east, sun rises in the east. So therefore the sun worshippers would be filled with the east. This is a euphemism for backsliding behavior, paganism culture, and just a doing away of Yah's commandments. And it tells you because and practice magic like the Philistines, and they are pleased with the children of foreigners. And their land is filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. And the land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. And the land is filled with idols. They bow themselves to the work of their own hands, to what their own fingers have made. And the lowly bows down, and the high is humbled. Therefore, you do not forgive them. Enter into the rock and hide in the dust because of the fear of Yahweh and the splendor of His excellency. When I read that, it just really reminds me of the country that we live in. We live in a country that we have an overabundance of everything. We don't even know what it feels like to go and turn on the water and not have running water, unless we just didn't pay the bill. But to live like that every day, to go and have to like look for food, scavenge, and we don't know what that is. But there are countries who live like it right now. America, we are abundant in everything. We're gluttonous in everything. That's just what we do here, and there's an abundance. You know, so to me, when I read that passage, it reminds me of America. Verse 10 says, it entered into the rock and hide in the dust because of the fear of Yahweh and the splendor of His excellency. There's a prophecy that speaks on when Mashiach returns, that those who oppose Him are going to be trying to hide from His light, His splendor, and that they'll be begging that the cliffs fall on them to show them, and they won't. There's nowhere to hide from this light. There's no more darkness to cower under, and they conspire. And so to me, verse 10 is indicative to that. He talks about His excellency. That's His Shekinah. That's His light. In verse 11, it says, the lofty looks of man shall be humbled. The pride of man shall be bowed down. And Yahweh alone shall be exalted in that day. Because right now He's not. It says, for Yahweh or Sabaoth, or which is Yahweh or Yahuwah of armies, has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up so that it is brought low, and against all the cedars of Lebanon that are high and lifted up, and against all the oaks of Bashan, and against all the high mountains, and against all the hills that are lifted up, and against every lofty tower and every strong wall. Stop. You're not going to understand what they're talking about until you understand a bit about demonology. The pagans would build altars and build them often high. Lebanon has always been revered for its tall cedar trees. Huge. That's where the battle blew between David's son and the men that David had with him. And he said when they got caught in that forest, that the forest devoured a lot of those men, because it was just that monstrous, you know. Just forest was just something else. But that wasn't enough side moving into Lebanon. The high pillars, the totem poles, the obelisks, they're always built to be high as a middle finger to our Creator. The high parts. It was taught to me in the Kabbalah that every city has a high point, and every city has the highest building, and that on that highest building is where the chief demon or the chief spirit resides on, and they reside there and watch over the city, and all the other ones work for it under it. In every city, right? And it so happens that these buildings are owned by banks. They're always owned by banks. Always. So when you talk about the World Trade Towers coming down, a lot of people felt like that was judgment and they should have left it, but they rebuilt it again.
Is that why? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A lot of these old movies I watch, you know, the tallest buildings have gargoyles.
That's where the practice comes from. Where are those gargoyles looking at?
They're looking down.
Absolutely.
But,
absolutely.
Know, and I mean,
mm-hmm.
No, they're like.
They have wings. Yeah, they have wings.
But they're grotesque looking creatures.
And you would find these on even like medieval cathedral churches, right, and things like what places where you wouldn't even expect to see such gruesome despicable looking creatures, very ominous, somehow like a Steven Spielberg or M. Night Shyamalan movie. But they're there. And this is the whole thing. These high places, they're built out of pride. I broke down the difference between a lamb and a goat today for JoJo, and they see, well, you wonder why the devil is often portrayed as a goat. You know, when you see the pentagram and everything like this. Like, yeah, I've seen it before. I said, well, because, you know, anatomical wise, the sheep or the lamb and the goat, they share a lot of, like, spot on. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of anatomical similarities. However, it's the temperament, or in our case, the spiritual standpoint, that would make them different. The lamb is a lamb. It's very passive, easy to lead. It's going to follow, perfect submission. Doesn't question much. If you lead a lamb, the lamb's watching you, and you jump off the cliff, but you got a rope to catch you, the lamb ain't gonna know he's gonna go. And sort of other lamb, they follow you unto death. This is why you fight tooth and nail to protect them. When David was given his exploits as the beast he killed them because of they were trying to fuck with his lambs, his sheep. The bear, the lion, that he talked about killing with his bare hands, they would try. One ran off with it in his mouth. And David chased him down. He chased him down. Bare hands took him out. Bare hands took him out. Already tells you the dynamics you're supposed to have, that I'm supposed to have. If I'm the shepherd, I ought to be willing to risk my life against insurmountable odds to go fight for you. True. And let Yah be my source of strength. Like David said, Goliath, you fight me with spear and shield and sword, but I fight you in the name of the Most High. All right, well, that's our job. But you got to be the suicide bombers running after y'all, making sure you guys are platinum. And your job is the same way the lamb is. This is my nourisher. This is my protector. He's going to feed. He's going to nourish. And don't be the goat, because the goat, on the other hand, the stubborn old billy goat, number one, he kicks you. He will spit at you. He thinks he's smarter than you. You're going to have to contest with him. Right? He'll try to sneak out. You got to go chase after him. When you finally catch him, because goats like to hide in crags. Goats have this uncanny ability to scale high, sheer cliffs. You got to look it up. It's amazing. It is amazing what they can do. And unlike most lambs, goats get horns and they'll ram your ass. Goats are dangerous. That's why many people didn't really like goats, or goats are cheaper to house than lambs, because it takes a certain person to want to deal with a goat, especially many of them. That's what they call them, stubborn billy goat. They'll raise up and do this and try to, because their hooves, because they spend a lot of times in the crags, they're sharp. Not like lambs, who spend most of the time grazing in the pasture. Their hooves are jagged and sharp, and they raise up and do this, they can scratch your damn face off. A lamb would never raise up to a shepherd. Wouldn't even think about it. It's funny that we associate the devil with being a goat, and then we associate the Mashiach with being the lamb. See, in our day and age right now, passive is weak. It's weak, it's insecure. But the lamb himself said that those who want to become first must become last. So, pick for this day who you shall serve. Anyhow, verse 16, it says, and against all the ships of Tarshish, that's Spain. We went over that last time with Amber. And against all the desirable craft, and the loftiness of men shall be bowed down, and the pride of men shall be brought low. And Yahweh alone shall be exalted in that day, and the idols completely pass away. It says, and they shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth, from the dread of Yahweh and the splendor of his excellency, when he arises to shake the earth mightily. They ain't talking about us, because we ain't been given over to the spirit of fear. All right? They ain't talking about us. They're talking about them. It says in verse 20, in that day Man shall throw away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they made each for themselves to worship, to the moles and the bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks and into the crags of the rugged rocks, because of the fear of Yahweh and the splendor of his excellency. It's funny that you find us going into the crags. I just told you that these goats,
Right.
they hang out there. So now we're going to go hang out with the goats. When he arises to shake the earth mightily, cease from man, whose breath is in his nostrils. For in what is he to be reckoned upon? Chapter 3. For look, the Master Yahweh of armies is turning aside from Jerusalem and from Judah the stock and the store and the supply of bread and all the supply of water, and the mighty men and the man of battle, the judge and the prophet and the diviner and the elder, the commander of 50 and the highly respected men, and the counselor and the skilled craftsman and the clever enchanter. So he turned away from everybody. And I shall make youths their heads, and children shall rule over them, and the people shall exert pressure, man on his neighbor. The young rise up against the older, and the lightly esteemed against the highly esteemed. When a man takes hold of his brother in the house of his father by the garment, here goes this that garment again, and say, come, be chief over us, and let this ruin be under your hand. He shall swear in that day, saying, I am not a healer, for in my house is neither bread nor garment. Do not make me a chief of the people. Let me stop this. A lot being said here. Yah has turned his face of all the people of renown, the commanders, the elders. I mean, he's completely doesn't hear him anymore. Says, I'm going to take your children and make them lords over you. This happened before. It happened before. When we left Egypt, them people who left Egypt, we spent 40 years in the desert because those people, the parents had to die out. He made their children. That's what happened. That's why we spent 40 years in the desert. On foot, a walk from Egypt to Israel is no longer than, I believe, a week. It doesn't take 40 years. We went the long route because these people had to die off. A slow death. And he's going to raise their children up. And that's what happened. Not only that, but it gets so bad that people are like, yo, we need a leader. Situation's so fucked up that nobody even wants to step to the podium to take a hold of this chaos. It's like, yo, brother, come lead. He's like, yo, listen, I ain't a healer, bro. I don't do that, dog. I don't have no food in here, and we don't have no clothes. Because those are the clues. Because then in verse 4, chapter 1, you got women saying we have our own food and our own clothes. Just take us in. They're talking to the same man. Because it got so bad. It's gotten so bad that nobody wants to even be a leader. Everybody's running around with their heads cut off. Everybody's just trying to survive. And when it gets like that, you're looking for any way out. Any way out. That's why it's so important that we read these verses leading up to this, because it's not just talking about polygyny. Something greater going on. And prophecy is always twofold. If it was good for them back then, it's going to be good for us today. It's always twofold. So we see about the destruction of Jerusalem. It wasn't just the first time when the Babylonians destroyed it in 586 BC, but the Romans as well in 77 AD. Prophecy is always twofold because there is no today, yesterday, tomorrow for this creator. Therefore, when he speaks something, oh man, just pray that it's in your benefit. Because if not, it's typically going to happen twice. Because he doesn't exist in time. It just doesn't. By the time it comes to us, it's in time. But his words are everlasting, which is why we're still reading about them to this day. Be a critic all you want of scriptures, or it contradicts itself and move the roof and everything. That this has always been the best-selling book in times of war and in times of peace. It speaks volumes to me. The fact that GQ has a man of the year every year, they don't never put Yahshua, the Mashiach, up there is mind-blowing, because there hasn't been a man that has changed the entire hemisphere of the planet like that one guy did a little over 2,000 years ago. Straight up. Anyway, back in 6, it says, when a man takes hold of his brother in the house of their father, so they're living together, kind of like me and Trey right now, by the garment, and say, come, be chief over us, And let this ruin be under your hand. Like, please let this be, your control, and do some damage control, some PR. He shall swear in that day, saying, I am not a healer, for in my house is neither bread nor garment. Do not make me a chief of the people. For Jerusalem has stumbled and Judah has fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against Yahweh, to provoke the eyes of his esteem. The look on their faces witnesses against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. Another big clue. And they do not hide it. Woe to their being, for they have brought evil upon themselves. We live in a day and age where you pretty much have all kinds of walks you could think of. You got slut walks, you got homosexual walks. We openly flaunt it. Everyone seems to be saying, F you. It's open. It used to be hidden back in the day. In the closet. There ain't no more closet now. It's just empty space. Because if it's spoken about against, it's out there in your face. It's open. And the thing about it now, you think it's getting bad now. That's why I see, don't fear what the government or the serpent plans on doing, because he's a defeated enemy. You need to fear when the commander-in-chief starts the war. We just read about him shaking the earth. Lucifer ain't really had that power. They make a little earthquake here and there. But we're talking about the whole earth being shook simultaneously. That's a different kind of wrath. The wrath of this dragon spoken of in Revelations does not compare to the wrath of the Lamb. Doesn't sound like it, but I promise you, there's just no comparison. And we ain't seen it yet. But when it happens, even us believers are going to be like, damn. How much will be the people who are against him?
You said what? You said the wrath of the what? It doesn't compare to what?
And so in Revelations, you read about the wrath of the dragon, which is the serpent. He's enraged because, his time has just got that much more shorter. He knows his speed. So he's roaring, raging at this point. And there's no more politics. Right now, everything's political. They hide their agendas through political jargon and geographical promises and all types of political finesse. Cause he got time of day. But as he moves forward, he's going to see these getting cut off. And he's going to start to become enraged. And they're just going to start lopping off heads. Literally, that's how we're going to die in scripture. If you're going to be martyred, it's going to be beheaded. And it tells you that right in Revelations. So, but that wrath of the dragon just will not compare to the wrath of the Lamb and the wrath of the Father when provoked. Nobody wants that. When people talk about, only God can judge me, I'd be like, you by yourself. Cool. I don't want to be judged, but I don't want that. I read what happens when they judge it. I don't want that. Like I said, line me up. Creator speak. Who got a problem? I'm cool. Got a problem? Mine. Who got a problem with it? I mean, nigga, I'm good. You like it? I love you. Let's do it. No problem. Don't judge me, please. My. So I don't know if people know what they actually see when they see that. For those who believe, we're being judged right now. You're going to face the persecution right now. When they start talking about handing out mandatory vaccines for you to go in Walmart and pick up your fucking daily bread, and you say, fuck that, you be judged right now. You willing to watch your kids not eat? Your gardening really took place like that? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Seriously. You gonna give in to the flesh? Wow. Scripture says if you place any of these things before him, you're not worthy to be called into the kingdom. And like I told Joe today, I said, listen, famo, we're moving to a point to where you're either with it or you're not. Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your religious background, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter even your sexual preference. None of that matters. When it comes time to, hey, are you with the system? You're going to say, yeah or no. All that other shit don't matter. It don't matter. Well, I don't know, because, it don't matter. They're knocking at your door. Hey, did you get the vaccine? You get it back? Nah, we good. We good. Come out now. We all right. You don't even know why. It don't matter. You either in the book of the Lamb. You ain't in the book of the Lamb. It's because you got the mark. You're in the book of the beast. That's what we're headed towards. That's what we're headed towards. Everything else is simply irrelevant, right? So back to this, is get worse. Um, uh, Verse 10, it says, "Say to the righteous, it is well, for they eat the fruit of their doings." Who? "Woe to the wrong, evil, for their reward is his hand, of his hand is done to him." Meaning you shall reap what you sow. "My people, youths exert pressure on them, and women rule over them." Wow. "O my people, your leaders lead you astray and swallow the way of your paths." One thing about Rome, Rome was a very mighty empire. Rome got taken down because of its overabundance, its luxurious lifestyle, hedonism, and then they eventually, their women. Old Rome had a system where women could own property. It was awesome. But there were certain things that were delegated for men. It was fitting for that. But when you look at Nero and look at Caligula, these men were having sex with their moms. The moms were pretty much running the empire through their sons, to the point where I believe it was Caligula who finally rose up and killed his mom after a while. The women helped, and not all women, but those women helped transform Rome into a bunch of hedonistic pillow softies. And you know what happened in Rome? The barbarians came and they took Rome over in a day. The men no longer knew how to fight. See, the Rome that we're talking about in Yahshua's time was the Rome you didn't want to fuck with. It's the Rome you didn't want to fuck with. But the Rome that collapsed is a different, complete species. The men had all but been taken out the equation. True men. How can you teach the boys on how to be men? The women can't do that. And when I say that to women, it's not a shot. Please don't feel like I'm shooting you. You were not created to do things that I could. You were created to do things that I can't. If you're able to do things that I can, then praise Yah. But in the same way, I can't bear a life 9 months. I don't know what it feels to bleed out for days on end and not die. So you can have all the sex changes you want, dude. You can never be a woman. She was born for that. She's extra soft. So her body's going to have extra layer fats to protect. You don't have that. You're going to be hard at one point. You're just not that. But you hate the very nature that has been made for in its order. And that's, people are upset. The gay men hate their nature. The feminists hate where they are. These niggas want to be that. They want to be them. Like I broke down the homosexual agenda. We went deep today, man, your son. Your son he's super intelligent. And I told him, in order to understand what's going on with the homosexual agenda, and I won't get into the debate about if people are born this way or whatever the case may be. That's a whole other thing for something else. But I do have answers on that too if you guys are curious. But it's a primordial one, and it goes back to Genesis. After the sin had taken place, 3 curses were given out, one for man, one for woman, one for serpent. I told Jojo, listen, fam, all curse, and as you get older, you're going to realize, is that everything is going to require work. Work. Even on your days off, it's going to require work. You got to work to keep whatever you've gotten once you get it. You get a woman, you're going to have to work to make sure she's in a good headspace. You see how the serpent came and talked to Eve when Adam wasn't there? Well, he's going to do the same shit to you. And just like David running after his sheep, his bride, against insurmountable odds, you're going to have to run after them too. And when you chase them off, guess what? They're just going to come right back. When Yahshua chased off the devil during this 40-day nights and 40-day fast, it said he left finally at the 3rd admonition, only to come back at a more opportune time. So we don't know how many times the devil came and tempted Yahshua. We only read about it once. Could have been his whole life. That's us. That's us. You're going to have to war with that. You're going to have to war with people who look just like you. You're going to have to war with the system, the cops. That's our curse. And pray to y'all that you make it to see a good age. Now, how you going to be when you get to that age where you be battle torn and war scarred? We don't know. But that's us. That is us. And from the ground you came, the dust you shall return. We're going to work sun up and sun down. Everything's going to require maintenance. Straight up. You get that out your head. You're not going to live life without strife, drama, contention. You're just not going to. You know, some of the things about with the women, because you can read about them. The labor and childbirth is just one of them. Right? But I told him about the serpent is where it gets interesting. When he talks about bruising the head, there'll be strife between the seed of man and the serpent. There'll be enmity. You're going to nip at his heel. Make him stumble. You're going to make him stumble. But one day, he's going to take his heel and he's going to crush your head. Apparently, Adam, Eve, and the serpent know this. Because when Cain's born, I told you Cain's name in Hebrew was Cain, and it means conqueror, subduer. They figured he would conquer the serpent, and obviously he didn't, but they figured he would. And so did the serpent. Oh, that's gonna be the neck that kill me. From that time forward, we have been told to be fruitful and multiply. But see, if the serpent can get us not to multiply naturally, then don't have to worry about that. He doesn't have to worry about this seed coming from man. If men are not producing seeds. Naturally, 2 women or women cannot produce. Naturally, 2 men or men cannot produce. Black Lives Matter was started by 2 dykes in Oakland, so I'm told, which blows my mind because according to their sexual preference, you don't even like the black seed that will procreate black lives to make sure that they even matter. So how does it make any sense? Confusion by way of deception. It's the old serpent that's his techniques. So that was the first form of spermicide back then, was just to keep people be gay. Then he can be like that. Look, you love him so much, but look what I can get them to do. And they're doing it by the droves. And now we got whole festivals and we televise it. And just saying. Verse 13. And Yahweh shall stand up to plead and is standing to judge the people. And Yahweh enters into judgment with the elders of his people and his heads. It is you who have eaten up the vineyard, the plunder of the poor. It's in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor, declares the master, Yahweh of armies. And Yahweh says, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks and seductive eyes, walking and mincing as they go, making a jingling with their feet. Back then, what the prostitutes would do is they would put little bells on their garments. Mashiach says that your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. So the difference between sin and iniquity is that iniquity is what builds up and it ultimately leads to sin. But if you're going to wait it to iniquity, it's way worse. Because we sin and not know. We probably sin on a daily basis for real, right? But we didn't premeditate it. But Cain didn't kill but he murdered his brother. Remember I told you that the Most High came and intervened when he seen that Cain had iniquity building up in him. He said, Cain, why are you so wrathful? Why are you so angry? Sin is at your door. You need to flee from it lest it overtake you. Now, he hadn't committed sin. It was at your door. You ain't open and let it in yet, but it's there. It's there. You can go. Obviously, we know Cain didn't do it. So Cain murdered his brother. He murdered his brother. We don't know how long Cain was feeling what he was feeling, but it led up to that. There's several stories in scripture that take place with the iniquity of man. Lucifer had iniquity before he rebelled. He just didn't rebel. He had iniquity. He lifted up his head and said, I shall be like. And then went around conspiring and taking a third of them with him. That didn't happen overnight. Like the Chinese say, a river doesn't freeze overnight. It's been kind of growing that way for a minute. The iniquity. And it's talking about the daughters of Zion. I don't believe they're just talking about women. Women, yeah, but I think the people, it's twofold. Because I was a whore. I I used to whore with Osiris. I used to whore with fucking Baal. I used to whore with oh man, so many different deities I can't even keep in count. I used to keep their practice on Christmas. The evergreen tree, their penises. That's what the evergreen tree represents. Represents a dick. It's fertility. It's fertility. It's the same thing as an obelisk. It's a dick. It's a phallic. They call it phallic because it's the polite way of saying dick, but that's what it is. I used to be a whore with an outstretched neck. I was a harlot. So it applies to both spirit and flesh. I was that in the spirit. You have someone who was dead in the flesh and the spirit. You know? Seductive eyes, walking and mincing as they go, making a jingling with their feet. Therefore, Yahweh shall smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion. Their hair is not going to go as great as it could. A woman's hair shall shine in glory. And Yahweh shall expose their nakedness. In the Garden of Eden, they ate the tree. They were naked. They were hiding from him. He says, well, who told you you were naked? Verse 18. In that day Yahweh takes away the finery of the anklets, and the headbands, and the crescents, and the pendants, the bracelets, the veils, the headdresses, and the leg ornaments, and the sashes, and the perfume bottles, and the amulets, the rings, the nose jewels, the costly robes, and the cloaks, and the shawls, and the purses, the mirrors, and the fine linens, and the turbans, and the large veils. I mean, did they cover everything? Nothing new up under the sun. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing we do is original. Nothing. Right? And it says, and it shall be instead of a sweet fragrance, a smell of decay. And instead of a belt, a rope. And instead of a well-set hair, baldness. And instead of a festal robe, a girding of sackcloth. And branding instead of loveliness. Your men shall fall by the sword, and your strength in battle. And her gates shall lament and mourn, and she, deserted, shall sit on the ground. Chapter 4, verse 1. And in that day. Now you know what they were in. Now you know what they were in. So for the men who use this verse to pro-polygyny, do you want what's coming to your home in that day? Because we just read about the man who didn't even want to be in charge of his own fucking house. He didn't want to be in charge of his own house. Let alone strange foreigners showing up to his door, smelling like decay, dressed in sackcloth, patches all over their head, like they just came from a disease-infested camp. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad in that day. We also read in chapter 2 that it's in the latter day. So it wasn't even in Isaiah's day. In the latter day. We are the latter day. Make no mistake about it. I wanted to... This verse gets quoted so much, just this right here. And see, the one thing that we can do is we can compartmentalize scripture. And when we do that, we miss out on so much more. You have to let scripture interpret scripture. You don't have to have a PhD. I'm not a college graduate. I'm not a Rhodes Scholar. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not a pro at anything, really. But this book is interpreting itself. These are not my thoughts. I'm literally reading you what it is. I'll give you commentary on customs. I'll give you commentary on geographical locations and historical context, just to help you build up what you're reading. But the words are the words. They don't change. And we're moving forward almost at light speed to that day that we're speaking of. I just felt that it was proper, given the times that we're in, just to be mindful where we are. When I read scripture, though it's in this latter verse is talking about women, I apply that to myself first because I'm the one reading it. So it's written to me. It's written to me. You know, when I was in prison and they cut my hair off and they gave me a state ID. They didn't call me by my name. They called me by the number, inmate 43, whatever. You know, brought down. You were talking about them being branded. I was branded in prison. Everyone is. I mean, the being pouring out. Everyone talks about being humble, but to be, to have any act of humility, you have to be humiliated. Mashiach, a king, a high priest, a prophet, the king, the high priest, was humiliated in front of his peers, beaten and stricken. Innocently. Had to have been. And so goes the head, so goes the body. So, that concludes today's lesson on the breakdown on Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1. You guys got any questions?
You did say that you would touch on whether or not you feel like people are born gay.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Okay. There are, when conception takes place, right? Early on, very early on, more than the doctors will allow you to believe, the hormonal because I have estrogen in me. You have testosterone in you, but you have more estrogen, and that's what really would let your body know that you're a woman. You cut off a man's testicles, and there's no more testosterone. That's why when you take a bull and you see him bucking and all that, but they tie off his nuts, now he's an ox. That's the difference. Now you can use him to graze and plow the field. A bull ain't gonna do that. The same way with a eunuch. If you want the eunuch to be around all your women as a king, you can't have much testosterone, because the women gonna see that, they gonna smell it. He gonna see it. He gonna hit. He gonna fuck something. So they cut off. They don't cut off the penis. They cut off the sac, the testes. The testicles is what generates the testosterone, and that's what drives not just our sex drive, but our food intake, our metabolism, our muscle development, even our memory. That is the man. That is the man. And in the old age, when we don't produce as much testosterone, sometimes we're not who we used to be. It's not a figure of speech. Yeah, it's the same way with, women. As you get older, you will stop producing this much estrogen, so then certain things like your lining down there will get thinner, and it'll become less wet and everything. Like, your body's changing now. It's changing, So anyway, there are chemicals. And I gotta look at the main culprit, but there's on a lot of plastic bottles that'll tell you that is I think it's BPH or BPA. This chemical is in ink. It's in dye. What is it?
BPA.
BPA. It's in our newspaper. It's sometimes even in our phones, and it seeps in through your skin, and it drastically lowers the level of testosterone in this seed, so that by that time, maybe by biology, it has been determined this will be a man child, but now the testosterone count is severely low, and it's a chemical imbalance in your body. Your body is natural in the soul. If you have a pH balance down there, your body, before you do anything, is going to try to heal itself. If you got something going on with your cooch down there, typically your body's going to start to do whatever it has to do to make that wrong right, to offset that. That's what your body does. When you get a fever, the body overheats because it's fighting. Right? That's why your body, so when you feel this, okay, at least we know your immune system is working. You're not cold.
So is it possible that my son was born with more estrogen than
Absolutely.
What's up with the hermaphrodites? They have a little bit of both.
It's the same thing. You confuse, again, what classifies one as male and female boils down to the sexual organs, was boiled down to the hormones. And if they're doing this, and one moment it's looking like it's going to be a female, and the next moment, then you are going to be, because in the beginning, we got nipples, but then you guys grow breasts. But if the zygote, and which will become a baby, is confused from the jump, the vaccines, the chemicals, you're going to get a gross distortion of what was supposed to be a perfect seed. Which reminds me of Lucifer, because he's the only one that's been attacking the seed of men from day one. Day one. This is what led to Moses. He thought Moses would not only free his people, but also kill a serpent. So then the Luciferian Pharaoh decides to kill and drown all the little Hebrew babies. for fear that this would be the seed to do it. Moses is put in the water, and Moses is actually an Egyptian name, like Tutmosis, and it literally means drawn out of the water. They drew him out of the water, and he saved his people. That's the second time that the serpent tried to kill the male child off. The third time is when you go to Herod. Herod hears about this Mashiach being born. These men from the east come and visit. They've heard about the born king. Where is he? Herod says, well, let me know so that I can worship him too. The wise men get brought to speed by an angel. Herod then sends out his men to kill all the babies and his promises 2 years and under. Just male childs. Gotta kill them off. Gotta kill them off. It's not to say that the men are more important than the women, because we don't exist without the other. So I don't get into debates like that, because that's debates based off flesh. That's what the devil wants to have genders arguing about who did what, who's most. It's fucking irrelevant. Like, it's irrelevant. At the end of the day, you taking this milk, you're not. I don't care if you got titties and you could produce milk, or you got nipples that just get hard. You got a bullshit and I got a dick. It don't matter. You taking the milk or not. What are we arguing about? However, there's a role that's to be placed, and if that role was going to come through a female seed, then you would see the persecution of a lot of little female babies being murdered by the numbers in the Bible. But you don't. You see the men, because it was supposed to come from the man and be a man, the seed that was going to crush his head. So that's why Lucifer has been targeting our little boys. And if he doesn't kill them off by the time they come of age, they're imbalanced. They have what the world considers toxic masculinity now, because they were never taught in a well-balanced system on what it is to be a man, that with great power comes great responsibility. They don't know. The grown-ass men in here don't know. They don't know. I wasn't raised by that. My father had to raise me this way. And only because I allowed him to. That meant they call if you were chosen. I don't even want my sons to have to go through that route. I would like to be here to train them up in the way that they should go. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think a lot of our babies, not just the men, but the women too, are born that way. And then life doesn't make it any better when then the woman has to feel like she has to be both mom and dad. I mean, niggas I've heard, and my mom was my mom and my dad. Fuck that nigga. He ain't around for heaven knows what reasons. Maybe because he just doesn't want to be. Maybe because he don't know how to be a dad. Maybe because he's in and out of the system. Maybe because he's still a child himself. Or maybe because it's all of the above. Maybe the nigga shot and got killed. I don't know. I've seen it all. Maybe because he's working so much that he just can't be. That's what the hairstylist told me. She said his father works so much. Because that's our curse. The worst fear of men is that you can't provide. So that's what keeps you drawn up in that, you know what I'm saying? It keeps you motivated, some of us who are giving over to the spirit of fear. So we work our asses off. Only to find out that we still failed at raising our children. That's your curse, my dude. Suck it up. That's how it goes down. That man has his son in prison, my hairstylist. Ex's dad has his son in prison. It's just praise Yah for us being able to break the cycle. And even if you don't find yourself in the man's standpoint, you will at least know the battle, and knowing is half the battle. You have a role to play. You can even aid and assist in this man's work, or you can aid and assist in the devil's work. Because destroying us, he's going to use you. He's going to use you. King Ahab and Jezebel. Prime example. Adam and Eve. Another example. Yeah, that's the lesson.
Wow.
You got anything else? Anybody?
That is wonderful.
Anybody?
That is wonderful.
Anybody?
That is wonderful.
Anybody?
That is wonderful.
Anybody?